Sustainability is the principle of engaging its practice so that the assets are available for the future generation without the depletion at the earlier level today. The carbon emission, the greenhouse gas effect, which is actually creating a harmful intention to the entire world, to the entire system, to the entire setup altogether. Now, the big picture here is that when you start considering the concept of environmental sustainability and accounting standards altogether, good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 10, Unit 2, second semester B.C.A. in Sustainable Development, where we are going to speak about environmental accounting. Now, all of us know that accounting has got various standards and methods. In fact, the procedures that are involved in terms of classifying the assets and liability. Environmental accounting is the new field of accounting which tries to make a complete stand in terms of understanding what are all the environmental assets that a nation has. So when we go through it, this is a subset of accounting proper, its target being that to incorporate both the economic and the environmental information. Somewhere down the lane, we have only worried about the factor called as profit and loss. So everybody wants to know only about the quantitative factor and not the qualitative factor. So using this environmental accounting, we want to know about the information standards in terms of the asset classification for what is the usage factor of the assets in terms of environment that we have been going through the last 10 years. Now, this has been conducted both at the corporate level and at the national economic level using a system called as the System of Integrated Economic Environment. What we call this typically as the SAN systems or the SNE system, which is basically trying to understand the procedure of accounting nationwide altogether, the systematic, network integrated national accounting patterns. Now, this is basically like a satellite connection which is trying to connect all the patterns of environmental information, trying to make you understand where has been the usage, the extraction value, to what extent we have been developed and dependent on the environment to a greater extent. Now, at the same time, we are also now going to calculate our GDP on a greener manner, where we are going to give importance to green GDP rather than just the normal GDP count altogether. So moving further, let's first try to understand what is the sustainability accounting method on which we are developing. The first thing here is that sustainability is the principle of engaging its practice so that the assets are available for the future generation without the depletion at the earlier level today. Now, what we are worried about sustainability is that if we start destroying the resources today, what would be the resource that would be available for the future generations? So whenever we are utilizing a resource, there is a cost that is involved in it. Now, that cost at which we are depleting our resources, would we be able to make this earth as a sustainable planet for the future generations to come, is a very big question mark that you and me need to answer altogether. But then, at the end of the day, a business needs to also understand, assess the value, find out what is the environmental impact it is causing because of its activities. Though we are, as a corporate house, as a business entity, trying to make profit, at the same time trying to serve the society by our products and services, at the same time we also need to know that we are causing an impact, a damage to the society. So one has to measure that impact in the long run. Followed by the sustainable measurement is a quantitative basis for that management in terms of the sustainability practice. So what do I mean by saying this is that, For the management also, the Sustainable Practices Act is mandatory. Why? Because if the business has to survive, they have to be with the nature, they have to understand the environment, they have to understand the system, the pattern altogether. So then only the sustainability would be able to move further, and we would be able to take this as an accounting standard practice altogether. Now, the next thing is that when a business is trying to make a decision to use the green packaging. Now, let's say that this is one of the sustainable practices that has been found in our system and we have started promoting this practice. We also need to understand how to make this practice with the cost-effective measure. Why? Because it needs to know that what is the cost that is incurred with the decreased waste disposal effect. What are all the factors that are involved in terms of making the consumer aware about it, in addition to the environmental implications. So the practice of accounting is not on a theoretical standard. It is not something where I just go ahead and start talking about the standards as a class, as a theory altogether and try to enlighten people. Rather, the management has to understand very clearly that whatever practice they are involving themselves, that practice has to be retained, that practice has to be made very clearly understandable to all these people. We have to tell them in a correct manner what is that we are looking for, what is that we need to develop together, what is that we are seeing as an environmental impact, as an environmental growth factor altogether. So that's where the sustainability will become a habit, will become a practice rather than just a principle altogether. Followed by the social accounting. The new kid on the block is social accounting. Well, this has been around from the 1960s, no doubt about it. And this is a collection of information about an organization's interaction with its stakeholders. So this will definitely try to identify the stakeholders broadly, defining them as any person or entity who is influenced by the organization. So whenever we talk about this broad term called as social accounting, this is quite a very interesting term which has been found out in the modern society or in the day-to-day society today, which is trying to understand about the interaction of the organization with the society. Now, as an organization, if you look here, we interact with the society. We are a part of the society for many activities, not only for the profits that we are earning. We are dependent on the society for the factor that they are our consumers. The society provides us with the resources. The society provides us with the communication, with the platform through which your products and services are showcased. So at any given point of time, we need to be thankful to the society because they are engaging us with the business. At a given point of time, let's for an example talk today, whenever an organization starts enriching itself on the social accounting, it tries to collect information about individuals, about the stakeholders and their relationship with the organization. So let's say whenever we are talking about a company like Infosys, Reliance, or when we are talking about organizations like Wipro or HCL Technologies, these are all companies who have a greater social bonding, not just through their products and services, but also about the impact of the applications that they have developed towards the society. So today when HDFC Bank says that we are planning to go towards a greener society, we are planning more in terms of making a carbon-free environment altogether. That has some social impact in terms of understanding how the society is getting built, how the bank wants to become a responsible social citizen altogether. Nevertheless, though this practice started in the 1960s, but then the effect of this practice, bringing something into practicality, bringing something into the use, has been started in the late 2000s. So the last about 20 years, we have become very conscious about the social accounting. And this has been a standard, rather a protocol that has been followed by most of the Fortune 500 companies. Followed by, whenever we talk about this environmental accounting in action, we start with the Kyoto Protocol, which talked about the factors of why we need to bring in environmental accounting. Starting here, the highest profile, the most globally reaching, actionable example that we can talk about in environmental accounting is definitely the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was trying to talk about a legal binding agreement that entered into a voluntarily by developing a fully industrialized nation designed to reduce about 6 greenhouse gases that are believed to contribute to the global warming. So nevertheless, let's try to understand this factor very clearly. The carbon emission, the greenhouse gas effect, which is actually creating a harmful intention to the entire world, to the entire system, to the entire setup altogether. The Kyoto Protocol tried to create an end to it, where they said that organizations, companies and countries need to voluntarily come forward, look into this greenhouse gas effect, reduce the pollution effect and create a safer environment altogether. Now that was actually trying to talk about the global warming, which is now becoming a very, very serious issue. I think most of you would know about it. Today, the incident that has happened in the peaks of Italy, where in a place called Marmolada, where you would be able to see that an entire peak of glacier just started melting down, killing many people, and it just came down like an avalanche effect. Now, because of the rise in temperature, the glaciers have started melting all over the world, and this is causing a serious global impact. So that's why when the Kyoto Protocol was created on the environmental economic basis, this was an action that was called on an international scale. So whenever we look into this protocol as an environmental action, this is an eye-opener to the millions and millions of people across the globe and to the leaders of the nation who really need to take up the issues of global warming seriously. Moving further, what does this Kyoto Protocol literally talk about? Using the metrics established by the United Nations, the Kyoto Protocol started pronouncing these following actions, especially in the carbon emissions. So national governments were asked to develop a collaborative relationship with the industry that produce greenhouse gases or industries that are responsible for a carbon emission on this earth. So what we need to do is that we need to enforce, we need to bring in a system through which we can reduce the carbon footprint on this planet Earth and make this earth even more a better place to live in. So what we wanted this organization is to bring on a systematic plan through which we can reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, we can reduce the emission of carbon footprint and make this earth even more livable. Now, to do this, it is not so easy. We cannot immediately start asking the organizations to reduce on the production or to reduce on in terms of the intake. But what they need to do is that start finding alternative measures through which the carbon footprint can be reduced. Start finding out methodology through which their impact towards the nature can be less. Now, for example, let's look into the UAE government, which was the first government in the world, first country in the world to go paperless. The impact of going paperless, going completely digital, has saved millions of trees across the world. Now, that's a very positive step that you can talk about. Why? Because that step that has been taken up by the UAE government is now forcing every single country in this world to go paperless, to go completely digital. Now, this is possible. It's not the factor that because UAE had a less population, geographically they are a smaller country. That's not a reason we can give about. But the only thing is that putting something into practice will definitely require a lot amount of the effort that has to go inside. So that's what we are typically trying to do. We are typically trying to understand in a long run, if we have to make the industries environmental conscious, that means we have to start taking a long positive step in terms of making them understand that each and every process, each and every product that they manufacture should be within the standards, within the norms of the environment, and then only it will be possible for us to bring forth the environmental accounting. followed by the Kyoto Protocol, which is very, very important. Why? Because measurement and metrics are the cornerstone of the Kyoto Protocol, which means to say that we are not just going to talk theory in the air. We're not going to just talk about some standards and we are not going to tell people that yes, it is done. Rather, we are going to bring in some metrics, some standards. We are going to make the industry understand that yes, we are monitoring you. We are seeing you at every inch, at every corner, how you are improving, how you are significantly contributing for the development of the economy from an environment standpoint. So there has been an aggressive pursuit from the environmental accounting, not only in response to the reporting that is required by the protocol, but to develop a system and an executive decision support that ensures that companies will remain profitable, no doubt, because that's my first priority, followed by the cycle of manufacturing, the air quality, the environmental consciousness circle that we have been talking about. So definitely this is a very, very positive step that has been taken up by many nations trying to follow the standards and make it even more sustainable. Followed by the accounting protocol also said that it was principally on the cost of compliance and the impact of fully industrialized nation. The US refused to ratify the protocol over economic concerns. Why? Because US being one of the most advanced nations in terms of economy, they felt that by ratifying the agreement, that's going to affect on the profit. But the countries that were willing to agree to this particular protocol turned to be sound on environmental practices, and they tried to mitigate the practices to their neighboring countries. Now, when you talk about countries like Denmark, Norway, Poland, or when you start looking into Austria, Sweden, all this kind of Scandinavian countries, they have been successful in making their country move up the ranks of the HDI, the Human Development Index, primarily because the concern towards the environment. They have shown people that to live in a place, the environment should always be conducive enough. The environment should be palatable. The environment should be in such an attractive position that when you migrate to our country, you should feel that you have migrated to heaven. That's exactly what they were able to do it. They were able to create a sound environmental accounting practice so that whichever standards they are setting, that could probably be an example, that could probably be a benchmark for other countries to follow. So what we were trying to do here is that though the advanced nations refused at the first instant, the smaller countries took this as a challenge, they implemented it, and they stood as an example for the advanced nations to follow up. Now, we are also talking about a very, very important factor called as the big picture and the little picture. Now, the big picture here is that when you start considering the concept of environmental sustainability and accounting standards altogether, the presumption of these strategy is that larger companies with waste disposal protocols manufacturing, while those circumstances definitely warrant for a careful analysis and measurement, sustainability and social accounting have their implications on the business part, followed by the factor that smaller business will also engage in social and environmental accounting when they choose to purchase local goods and services, track on their own savings of the decreased traveling and the shipping expenses, while the larger companies will try to involve with the environmental and the social accounting. So now what happens is that somewhere we are trying to strike a balance, saying that both these size of companies will try to engage themselves in the environmental audit and accounting, which will actually make them realize how they can save on cost, at the same time how they can create a positive impact towards the environment they live in. With this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been told through this presentation will have a practical as well as a theoretical effect in terms of learning. In the upcoming sessions, we will be talking more about the different commissions like the Brundtland Committee report, the Agenda 21, which has made a very positive effect towards the environmental economics. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.